So after a 2-year hiatus, I just wanted to say mahalo, dude, and I'm back with something awesome in mind. Alright, thank you so much for tuning into the first episode of the TwoScoops podcast, the podcast that gives you my 2 scoops. My name is Marcus. I hope that you're doing well dodging many of the great 2020 obstacles. And who knows, this might just be the next catastrophe for the month of August. Many of you listening probably already know who I am, but if you don't, I'd love to get to know you. And you can reach out to me at twoscoopsproductions@gmail.com. That's all one word, lowercase, nothing special. So here's a little bit about me. I'm a recent college grad from the University of Kansas with a bachelor's in interdisciplinary computing with a focus in biology. All that fancy jargon, and I'm a software engineer working in industry with many hobbies, including this one. So before you click off, I wanted to talk about this new idea that I've got. To begin with, I've always wanted to run my own podcast as a venture to connect and reach out to people and share experiences and stories. Ultimately, that would be my goal. Months ago, however, I was super conflicted with what type of content and what type of podcast I would even run. Now, I wanted it to be something that was educational, something that was accessible to everybody that was interested, and also, most importantly, it needed to be relatable. Now, I'll be honest, I don't listen to podcasts very often. So now you're probably thinking, oh, great. Why am I listening to some Joe's podcast online when he doesn't even listen to podcasts himself? Now, let me preface. I have yet to find a podcast that, first of all, engages me for long enough, and second, engages the audience as a whole. Don't get me wrong, I haven't scoured the internet for all the different types of podcasts that there have been, so I wouldn't know if even there was one that matched exactly this idea, but I just haven't found one myself. So don't ask me how or why, but I started thinking about the old newspaper columns for Dear Abby. I know that a lot of people probably don't even read those anymore, so then I thought, why not just digitize it like everything else? So the concept is super simple. Each episode, I'll cover a topic I choose from the audience requesting advice or information, add in some research, as well as my 2 scoops on top of that, and the community feedback and experiences. I really fell in love with the idea because it covers a wide range of topics, and I personally follow the same system, and I'm convinced that we can learn and grow from the experiences and shared knowledge from others. Unironically, I hope, the first topic is going to be over success, and this is a topic that I know that I and many people that I've met have been curious about. So what even is success? There's no doubt that every generation, each individual, and every culture has a different definition of success or what they perceive success is. So maybe I should have started this segment with a mansion rental with a bunch of shiny cars and said, oh, do you want to know the secret to being financially independent and making 6 figures every month? I think that would be completely baloney, and I hate those ads. I think that everybody hates those ads, but I don't know how those don't get red flags and just get taken down as a whole. But to begin with, I did a quick Google search to define success, and here's what came up. Success is defined as the accomplishment of an aim or purpose. So this is super vague. I wonder if we could do a little better. Merriam-Webster gives us 3 definitions. We have 1, a degree or measuring of succeeding, favorable or desired outcome, also the attainment of wealth, favor, or eminence. 2, one that succeeds. This is super helpful, by the way. And 3, obsolete, overcome, result. Now, I think that the first definition was at least a little better, but Indeed.com also articulates in a career perspective of how we might answer the question, how do you define success? To sum it up and give you a few key points, it's basically telling you that an employer might ask you this to gauge your level of problem solving and how you set goals for yourself and whether or not they're really relatable or achievable at the end of the day. So hopefully I haven't bored you to death with all these dreadful definitions, because now we have something to work towards. So let's break it down. First, whether it be career, life, social, success is derived from some accomplishment. Accomplishments generally come from goals and achievements. A potential issue that we run into here is whether or not we define or we view success as a means of the result, or can success be unrelated to the outcome as a whole? Of course, there's no right or wrong answer here, just better answers. And this is all case by case, of course. But remember those AP classes and those standardized tests and exams that you were asked to pick the best answer out of all 4 choices? Yeah, life is kind of full of all of those choices, so you might want to pay attention if you slept your way through school like I did. Ultimately, it would depend on your outlook and your philosophy. So I'll pose the question like this. what drives you or what excites you? I think answering this can reveal a lot about what you think success means. And here's a little bit about what I think in my 2Scoops. Anyone would be lying to you, and you would know that somebody was blatantly lying to you if they said that success was easily attainable. If I took a list of people that I viewed as successful, to name off a few like Bill Gates, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, etc., I might look at how successful they are, but how did they get there? The one that I really scratch my head on is Elon Musk and how painfully awkward his personality is. I can't tell if I'm jealous or I'm cringed at the idea that his personality actually took him to success. I mean, I watch a lot of his interviews and his presentations, and the man just can't speak to save his life. Whether or not you view CEOs as the poster child of success, you chase after fame and fortune, or you simply want to live peacefully away from all of the attention, there's a lot of work to get you to where you want to be. One popular trend that I've noticed in the last decade is the infatuation with common people to the schedule and the routines of successful people. Whether you agree with me or not, I think this is completely bonkers. Now, take this example. The idea that a Karen wakes up at 6 a.m., makes her bed, and then takes a cold shower is somehow going to make her the next Fortune 500 CEO, I think people are completely missing the point. And there's a reason why not everybody is getting successful off of these ideas or this get-rich-quick schemes. I'm going to cite the book 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I'm sure you're all aware of it, but I want to know if any of you have read it or what your thoughts about this book are. In my humble opinion, though, I think reading and absorbing all of this information won't make your dreams come true, and it doesn't guarantee you a way to success. Now, here's what I want you to think about. These resources give us a great place to start, which is in habit development. It does you no good to follow Mark Wahlberg's 3 a.m. to 6 p.m. routine if it means that you take a nap in midday. So, for the sake of publicity, he could even be talking about grooming his third nipple before bed, and people would take his advice religiously. So at the end of the day, the point is, time management and priority scheduling can take you a long way if it's done correctly. Now, we all know the saying all too well, there's not enough time in the day. But what if there were? All it could take is some shuffling to prioritize the goals that you want to meet, and pretty soon you can be the next socially awkward CEO. All jokes aside, I want to point out that it's easy for us to compare our lives with others. While it's good to motivate yourself by looking at people you look up to, it shouldn't hinder your success or the drive of success that you are aiming for. Every successful figure has to know what it's like to fail. So then the real question is, how do we cope with failure? I can name many things that I failed in life, and I'm sure many of you can as well, but all of these failures would be a waste of time if they didn't amount to something. Everyone's been told to learn from your mistakes, but what does that even mean? Was there an experience that you could learn from, or are you currently undergoing something that you could take as a lesson? Sometimes this can be super difficult, even if you know exactly where you started or exactly where you failed, and sometimes you don't even know where the mistake was in the first place. Here's something that I found helpful to break down the issue. If you only see the consequences of your action, but not the mistake itself, then it would be useful to think about what was affected or how it was affected. Then you think about, was there a target that you aimed for that failed, or was it just a result of blindly firing? So if you failed at taking a shot in the dark, then the mistake could be that you never aimed for a target in the first place. Of course, this is easier said than done to find where you started, right? But success and failure are a part of life, but when you start comparing your mistakes to other successes, life could literally just be about who mitigates failures the best. So here are some stories about where I failed and learned from some of my mistakes. My first one is about being a doctor. I was supposed to be a doctor at first. As I went through high school, I had the thought of being a doctor. In fact, I had absolutely no idea about what an engineer even did, let alone a computer scientist or a software engineer. I took elective courses to prepare myself for the medical field, and I took a look at great college programs. All this time and energy invested, and then what happened? So a lot of roadblocks in life basically made me reconsider the thought and this decision. Personally, I really didn't give myself too many options to think about, so I had to rethink and discover other fields. This changed extremely quickly as college rolled around because I had to ask myself the question about my lifestyle and what I wanted and what was important to me. So I took a shot at joining the School of Engineering, and I regretted every day of my life for the first semester. The one thing that really kept me going, though, was the challenge itself. So then I was able to convince eventually that I fit in the field and that I could do good and problem solving outside of the medical field. Of course, I had a lot of help along the way, and I look up to my cousin who had made the exact same decision, changing the path from medical profession to software engineering. So maybe I still question the what if surrounding this decision, but I don't dwell on it since I'm more than happy with where I'm at, and I count this one as a success in the books. I can't say that this is sound advice for everyone, but living life, trying out new things, even if it fails, is what life is all about. So now this next story is back in 2017 when I started TwoScoops. I started this through transitioning from changing my majors, so you can say that this might have been one of those rash decisions that you make during a life crisis. Now, this is something that I really enjoyed doing, but being swamped with classes and not even knowing where my life was taking me next made it extremely difficult and hindered my ability to think about what was even next for the channel or what was next for the video as a whole. This flopped since I dove headfirst into an arena which I had absolutely no idea what type of beasts that I'd had to tame. I had some good runs through the videos that I made. While they weren't really anything special, I made it through the flop and I took quite a bit learning out of this, especially for this time around. While I have no idea whether or not this podcast series will take off, I'm much more confident with the research, the time investment, and the content production, all which are key to having a good launch. So good preparation is underrated since it will give you the tools you need to overcome the obstacles that you might face along the way. Okay, story time is over. I'd like to hear from your experiences though and what you learned from them. I want to transition to talking about some useful habits that I found along the way, and hopefully they might help you as well. First, practice makes perfect. You've heard this time and time again, and it goes hand in hand with preparation. As a rule of thumb, I use the 49-51% rule. All things considered, if you were more successful 51% of the time in life, then you would be more successful still. Of course, failing 49% of the time might feel pretty shitty, but you're still more successful than you are a failure. Adding on top of that rule is that if you fail 49% of the time that you were practicing and nobody saw it, then did you really fail at all? Let me be clear by saying that the percentage means nothing. I don't have a secret method of calculating what percentage waking up on time will give you, and you should never go out there to find that answer. Again, though, I think this is a good habit to develop because I think it could change your outlook on life and it could really develop those good habits for you to see more success. I saw a great message on a bus on the way to campus one day and it really stuck with me. The message read that luck is when preparation meets opportunity. Will you be ready when the opportunity presents itself? So this put a lot of perspective into me. I've certainly come back to this idea many times that I felt successful, and I think of this as a good habit that almost generates a self-fulfilling prophecy for me. I hope that you all keep this one in your heart as well. One more awesome thing that I've seen is a poster I saw out volunteering for an organization I was a part of on campus in an elementary school setting. So the poster turned the word fail into the acronym for first attempt in learning. Wow, was my first thought. For all the times that I failed exams, which led to retaking classes and reteaching myself all of these concepts, that really stuck with me. And that was not only inspiring, but it opened my eyes about the taboo that we have surrounding the conversation about failure. Sure, those 6 to 10-year-old kids may never appreciate or understand it now, but for me, it had a really extraordinary impact. Now, on top of that, to see that message in a classroom setting where kids can be supported throughout their growth and the education itself, it speaks volumes to the importance of having the right perspective, especially at the face of a challenge. While I could ramble on about the cheesy definitions of success that you can just Google or other life hacks that you might be able to use, I think it's equally as important to take a look at what other people think of success and you to have the ability to experiment on your own. So I'd like to hear the experiences that you might have come across that stuck with you on your journey to success. And thanks to social media, we only get to see people for their highlight reels, and it's quite difficult to keep yourself from comparing your life to others, especially when you're having this conversation about success. Now, I'd like to give people with unconventional perspectives or people who just feel like they aren't enough, feel less isolated, and help them gain the agency that they need to be successful. Here's what some people chimed in to talk about in terms of success. The first comment that I have is that being able to accomplish what you set out to do and improve through what skills you gained accomplishing your goal. I like this one because it encompasses both the outcome and the journey. Success can come from the skills and the experiences that you learn to put towards your next goal as well. Next, real success is being happy doing what you love. I'm sure people are aware of this saying, if you love what you do, then it will feel less like work. I'd like to extend this though, because it's not just about your career, but also other aspects of your life. If you aren't happy with yourself to begin with, then you're never going to be satisfied no matter where you go or what you do. Next, somebody says, I've finished my undergrad, but once I finish chiropractic school, I'll feel confident with that. I like this one because it actually sets a goal to aim towards rather than just some vague statement about what they think success is. Next, sometimes even slight achievement is considered a success. I think yes on this one, especially for people who are still beginning to find themselves or discover what success means to them. Cherishing the little wins is important and it will bring you a long way. And even for those who are quote unquote veterans of success, it's also important to be able to look at all the little things and take those small wins as big wins. Now, finally, this last message says to ensure that you're not being pressured by yourself. I really like this message because everyone grows and learns from their own pace. Another thing that I'd like to add is maybe not being pressured by others around you as well. But something I'd like to say, however, is that being pressured and being challenged are two very different things. The only way that you can move forward is if you challenge yourself to do better, and success is by no means linear, and your limitations to success are only the obstacles that you set for yourself. Now, I'd like to thank everybody that chimed in and gave their own 2 scoops, and I'd be happy if even a single person felt related to one of these statements or gave them the opportunity to work towards their goal. Finally, I'd like to tackle this idea that success is nothing but a stereotype. Referring back to the story of me wanting to be a doctor, growing up with a lot of traditional influence, my life was certainly not as easy or difficult as other Asian households. I was kind of like in the middle of the road. But I think the influences from model minority stereotypes as well as the general household urge to succeed was enough to make me push myself to aim higher. But there were definitely times that I would feel that I myself wasn't enough. Now, don't get me wrong, I grew up having a competitive flame in me, whether it be in video games or extracurriculars, but I didn't quite understand when I would be successful. Aside from starting to pick up my grades in school, it seemed like I wasn't enough and I would get bored with the stereotypical Asian activities like orchestra, math club, science club, etc. When high school came around though, I did the unthinkable. I enrolled in speech and debate. This was a joke for my family. I grew up quiet and timid at the idea of speaking out. So I would get comments like, oh, you wouldn't be able to make it, or oh, you're too shy. And I probably took this more to heart as a challenge. So I really submerged myself in the next 4 years deeply into the competitive environment, and I competed nearly every weekend. So my family didn't understand, and they probably still don't understand, but this was monumental for me to be able to break out of this mold of the stereotype for success and being able to define it for myself. Sure, I found myself playing into the character of being more credible because I'm Asian, but this is where I learned that people's opinion of me was ultimately optional as long as I accomplished the goals that I set for myself. Throughout the course of 4 years, I used this to gain more and more success, and it basically became formulaic. It was really easy for me to compete on my own grounds when I had the preparation and the confidence to dictate where and how the round would end. What I'm really trying to say here is that this growth process for me is really a prerequisite to how I could think freely and experiment on my own to have my own definition of success. To be satisfied with myself and the goals that I set was extremely enlightening for me. And I'd like to throw it back to you and ask, is there a mold that could be holding you back or suppressing you from success as a whole? So just to wrap things up, some things that I've taken away from this topic, and hopefully you have as well, is that first, failure is human and there's no such thing as being perfect. Even well-written programs and robots will fail. Trust me, I've written plenty of those. Next, failure and preparations are key to success, so it's time to break away from this taboo around failure. And third, no one succeeds at everything on their first try, so prepare yourself for when it really matters. And lastly, break the mold that's holding you back from your success. So I guess what I'm trying to tell you is to go out there and fail. I hope that you find this segment helpful and that you tune into future episodes of my podcast. Oh, and by the way, this is not legal or financial advice, so I'm not liable for any of your actions. Anyway, I have many places on social media that you can go ahead and follow me. First is my Patreon at patreon.com/TwoScoopsProd. Everything is spelled out, one word, lowercase, nothing special. Getting in touch with me on my Patreon will give you access to more in-depth content, giveaways, one-on-ones, and the ability to contribute to some of the content. Please consider being a part of this TwoScoops community. There's even a little bit more on this topic that I'll be posting there as well. Next, on my Instagram, which is @Marcus_TSP. Whether you're listening to my podcast or watching it on YouTube, here's where you can find more, which on my podcast, it's on iTunes, Spotify, and SoundCloud. And then on YouTube, it's just TwoScoops. And lastly, to get in touch with me, you can just email me at twoscoopsproductions@gmail.com. That's all one word, lowercase, nothing special. Again, I hope that you're one step closer to finding success. Please chime in on the conversation. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Share this with family, friends, and loved ones, and spread some good and share the knowledge. Have a great day. Mahalo.